After I lost our baby, my husband, a psychiatrist, used hypnosis to erase my memories. Then he took his female patient on a 3-month getaway. When they came back, he restored my memories. I remembered I was a wife and a mother, but the love gone. My life no longer revolved around chores. The constant nagging I was once known for disappeared. At first, Kian and Oliver thought I was just giving them the cold shoulder, trying to get attention. They ignored my strange behavior until they stumbled upon a forum post I'd written. My memory is back, but my feelings are gone. I can't even understand the person I used to be. Just being in the same room as my husband and son makes me anxious. What do I do? I was curled up in the guest room when harsh light suddenly flooded in, jolting me awake. A tall man stood in the doorway, silver-rimmed glasses, eyes cold as ice. Took me a few seconds to realize it was Kian, my husband. "Why are you sleeping in the guest room?" His voice was calm, completely devoid of warmth. I clutched the blanket and sat up, forcing a weak smile. My memories just came back. Everything feels off. I need to sleep separately for a while just to adjust. He gave a slight nod, looking indifferent. "Suit yourself then," and casually. "You didn't call me today." I looked at him confused. "Call you? Why would I?" There was nothing to say. His tone grew colder. "You used to call me nonstop if I wasn't home by 10. Shame made my skin crawl. I just wanted to disappear. "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." After a long silence, he dropped the words coldly. "You're just throwing a tantrum." Slow. He turned and walked away, only glancing back at the door to order. "Throw whatever fit you want, but make sure you clean my study." I opened my mouth, but no words came. I pulled out my phone and started looking for a good housekeeper. I truly had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. Looking back now, I was almost impressed with my former self. I used to wake up at 6 a.m. sharp every day to carefully prepare breakfast for Oliver, who had allergies, then make a separate meal at 7 for Kian and his sensitive stomach. After quickly eating my own breakfast, I cleaned the entire house until it sparkled. Kian was a neat freak. Stand the slightest bit of clutter, especially in his study. I tried to tidy up like I used to earlier today, but the flood of memories left me so exhausted I could barely stand. I must not have put his files back correctly. That was probably why he came to remind me. I drifted off to sleep, only to be woken a few minutes later by frantic knocking on the door. "Why haven't you made breakfast yet? I'm going to be late." Oliver's voice was sharp with impatience. "I ordered take out," I said calmly. "It'll be here soon." I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. Angry kicking against the door followed immediately. "Dad never should have changed you back. Lila always makes me breakfast." I opened my eyes again to find Kian roughly pulling me out of bed. "What did you feed Oliver?" he demanded. Before I could process what was happening, he dragged me in front of Oliver. The boy's body was covered in red hives. He was struggling to breathe. "Even if you're mad, you don't take it out on Oliver. He has severe allergies. A reaction like this could stop his breathing." An ambulance arrived quickly and rushed Oliver to the hospital. I hurried after them, trying to explain. When I ordered his breakfast, I specifically listed all his allergens. The restaurant confirmed it was safe. Kian shot me a furious look. "Don't make excuses. You sent the nutritionist I hired away, insisting on controlling his diet yourself. And now just because he sided with Lila, you decide to get back at him? That's not it. If you just listen to me, David." He cut me off coldly. "Don't make me regret restoring your memory." The truth was I'd been so strict with his diet, precisely because his allergies were so severe. The nutritionist he'd hired had quit after a few days, admitting that caring for a child with such needs was too demanding. But I was too tired to explain. Once the new housekeeper arrived, none of this would be my problem. The doctor said Oliver had an allergic reaction to honey. He hadn't consumed much, so it wasn't serious, just needed in-for and some observation. I called the restaurant. The manager explained that the honey was a complimentary side. The packaging was clearly labeled with an allergen warning. Oliver must have snuck the sweet stuff. He always had a sweet tooth, but was allergic to both honey and chocolate. I used to watch him like a hawk. Nothing like this had ever happened. The one time I let my guard down, this was the result. I was about to turn and explain to Kian when a small figure suddenly rushed to my side. "Isabel, what are you doing at the hospital?" I knelt in surprise and hugged Isabel Fraser. She was the one who'd stayed with me the entire time I was hospitalized with amnesia. Back then, I was terrified and lost, feeling like a part of me had been hollowed out of days. All day, unable to handle even the simplest things. It was Isabel who patiently stayed with me, taught me and kept me from feeling so utterly alone. She fell off the swing and hit her head, Her uncle, Frederick Moss, explained. He looked visibly relieved to see me. Are you okay? Does it hurt? I asked, stroking her hair. Isabel wrapped her arms around my neck.
I'm okay.
I just missed you so much. I missed you, too. Frederick watched us with a gentle expression. What are you guys doing here? Is everything all right?
I'm fine.
It's my son. He had an allergic reaction. That's good. He paused, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, is your son going to be okay? I couldn't help but smile.
He's fine.
He'll be okay after the 4. Frederick was about to say something else, when Kian's angry voice boomed from behind me. I turned to meet Kian's dark stare. His gaze swept over Frederick, then landed on the smile on my face. His brow instantly furrowed. Oliver's crying. I immediately looked. Poured Oliver on the hospital bed. The redness on his face had subsided, but it was now streaked with tears. He looked extremely agitated, pointing a crying finger at Isabel. Who is she? This is Isabel. I explained softly. She kept me company when I was in the hospital. Don't cry. It's not good to have tears on your face. You're the big brother. You need to act like it. My words only made him cry harder. I don't know her. Get out. Exhaustion washed over me. Oliver had never liked me. The number of times he tried to get rid of me was too high to count. When I saw how agitated he was, blood starting to back up in his foreline, I turned and walked out of the room without looking back. After a lot of trouble, I finally found a housekeeper willing to do a trial run. I told Oliver ahead of time. I found a housekeeper. She's coming over in a bit, so you can see if she's a good fit. After the incident at the hospital, Oliver had been unusually quiet, less confrontational. He actually spoke up in a small voice. Mom, I thought you didn't like strangers in the house. He haven't called me Mom in a long time. Usually, it was just my first name, or every time I tried to discipline him, he'd defiantly say he liked Lila better. I pushed aside the uncomfortable feeling and forced a dry laugh. Housekeeper will make life easier for everyone.
Kian pushed his glasses up,
chiming in with a cold edge.
It'll be good for you to get some rest.
Just try not to find some ridiculous excuse to fire this one. Claiming she's trying to seduce me, deliberately bringing up my past foolishness to humiliate me. That familiar sickening shame washed over me. That was me back then. I was drowning in love, insecure and ridiculous. I was about to assure him when the doorbell suddenly rang. Oliver glanced at me, then surprisingly went to open the door himself. Sounds from the door. Before I could react, Lila walked in, young, beautiful. So this really is Dr. Hale's house,
she said.
I saw the ad for a housekeeper and thought I'd come, see if I could be of help and calm. Expression vanished. He slammed his cup on the table, splashing water everywhere. I've told you 1,000 times, Lila. We only have a doctor-patient relationship. Did you bring her here on purpose? Just to humiliate her? I scrambled to explain, but it was pointless to argue now. I could only try to diffuse it. My standards were so high that no one else would apply. She was the first person to say yes. I didn't even check her background. How could I have known it was Lila? I know I was too sensitive before, and I misunderstood her. If she's willing to be our housekeeper, and you two already spent 3 months together, you're familiar with each other. It's a perfect fit. Just consider it my way of making up for my past mistakes. My tone was calm. I even had a relaxed smile, as if a weight I'd carried for years had finally been lifted. I was more at peace than ever before seeing me like this. Kian's chest inexplicably tightened. A sudden wave of panic washed over him. Something important was slowly slipping through his fingers. He remained silent, but Lila's eyes welled up. Dr. Hale, am I causing trouble for you?
I'm so sorry.
You treated me for free, stayed with me late into the night, and even took me to the Smoky Mountains to recover. I was so grateful.
I just wanted to help. I'm so sorry.
I'll leave right now after a speech like that. Of course, Lila stayed. Kian even reminded me, remember what you said. Don't give her a hard time on purpose. Then he reached out and gently stroked my cheek. His voice softened. Sloan, you don't have to force yourself to please me. I'm already used to your outbursts, he added. I changed the sheets in the master bedroom to your favorite ones. Come back and sleep there starting tonight. Goosebumps rose on my arms again. I suddenly understood. Kian probably wanted to give the spacious guest room to Lila. The next day, I offered to switch rooms with Lila and moved into the housekeeper's quarters myself. Kian's expression grew even more sullen, his anger barely suppressed. He was so distracted that he spilled skull, holding coffee on Lila's arm, without even noticing. That night, he took Lila into the study. He glanced at me as they went in, But I was engrossed in my phone and paid him no mind. In the past, the study was off limits to everyone, including Oliver, but Lila was the exception. From then on, Kian couldn't stop comparing me to Lila. He praised her cooking, how clean she kept the house, how organized his study was. Missing an opportunity to throw in a jab at me, I just rolled my eyes in frustration. If he wanted to praise her, fine. But did he have to tear me down to do it? Seeing my lack of reaction only made Kian's mood fouler. I couldn't be bothered to be in the same room with him.
Mom,
Lila gave Oliver a piece of candy.
can I eat it?
Oliver, who'd been much quieter lately, held up the candy and asked in a small voice. Eat it if you want, I said, without looking up. But it's new. So what? Oliver suddenly burst into tears, completely distraught.
Mom, please don't stop caring about me.
I'm allergic to nuts. You never let me eat them before. He was crying now, messy and raw. I know I was wrong. Everything you did was for my own good.
Please don't ignore me.
I promise I'll listen from now on. It took me a moment to catch up. Seeing Oliver crying so wretchedly, I was at a loss. All I could do was look at Lila. Can you comfort him? He's always liked you. Lila pulled him into a hug to soothe him. I quickly left the room, closing the door on the sound of his cries. Before, I would have been torn apart by guilt, heartache. But now, as I pressed a hand to my chest, there was nothing inside but an empty space. I felt nothing at all. During my amnesia, I would still feel a mysterious heartache and cry through sleepless nights. But I suppose I'd cried all my tears out. My heart had gone numb. I no longer had the strength to care about anyone. Late evening, Kian was in the shower when he called out, "Sloan, bring me my bathrobe." I was painting my nails and didn't want to smudge them. So I turned to Lila. "Could you get it for him?" "I can't right now." Lila blushed, shy look in her eyes. Biting her lip, she nodded. "Of course. I'm happy to do anything Dr. Hale needs." After she went in, I focused on my nails. A moment later, Kian's furious roar echoed from the bathroom. "Get out," followed by the sharp sound of shattering glass. A few seconds later, Kian stormed over to me. His hand was cut and bleeding. "Sloan, what in the world are you playing at?" he demanded. "You used to never let another woman get near me. And now you're practically throwing her at me." Watching him lose control, I felt not a single ripple of emotion. The blood dripped steadily from Kian's palm, hitting the polished hardwood floor, with dull, rhythmic taps. I looked down at the bright red drops, then back up at his face. His silver-rimmed glasses were slightly askew, his hair damp and clinging to his forehead, his chest heaving under a half-buttoned shirt he must have grabbed from the floor in his fury. In the doorway of the hallway bathroom, Lila stood, frozen, clutching a crumpled terry cloth robe to her chest, her eyes wide, glistening with well-practiced tears. "Sloan," Kian spat, his voice trembling with a rage I had never heard from him. "In our 8 years of marriage, did you hear what I asked you? What kind of sick game are you playing?" I set the bottle of nail polish down on the low table beside me. The applicator made a soft clink against the glass. "There's no game, Kian," I said evenly. My voice lacked the tremor it used to have whenever he raised his voice. In the past, a harsh tone from him would send my pulse skyrocketing, prompting an immediate flood of apologies, a frantic scramble to appease him, to make sure his world remained orderly and untroubled. "You asked for a bathrobe." I had wet polish on my hands. Lila was standing right there, and she is employed here to assist with domestic tasks. It seemed the most practical solution. Practical? His jaw tightened so hard, I could hear the grinding of his teeth. "She is a young woman, a former patient. Have you lost your mind entirely? You took her to the Smoky Mountains for 3 months, Kian," I reminded him. Quietly, my tone as flat as reading a weather report. "You shared cabins, meals, and sunrises while I was recovering in a psychiatric facility with a blank slate for a brain. If you weren't concerned about professional boundaries or modesty, then why should a bathrobe in your own hallway constitute a crisis now?" Lila let out a strangled sob. "Dr. Hale, Mrs. Hale, please, it's my fault.
I
Shouldn't have. I didn't mean to make Dr. Hale uncomfortable. I was just trying to help like Mrs. Hale said." "Go to your room, Lila," Kian snapped without looking at her. His eyes remained locked on mine, searching for something, a flicker of jealousy, a spark of spite, the vindictive triumph of a scorned wife. He found nothing, just the placid, glassy surface of a pond frozen to its very
bed.
Lila scampered down the hall, her bare feet pattering against the runner before her bedroom door clicked shut. Silence fell between us, thick and suffocating. Oliver's door at the end of the corridor remained cracked an inch. I could see the faint silhouette of my 10-year-old son peeking out, his eyes wide and haunted, clutching the edge of the wood until his small knuckles turned white. Kian took a step toward me, his bleeding hand hanging at his side, blood pooling between his knuckles and dripping onto the hem of his trousers. "You're bleeding." On the oak floor, I noted. "It will stain if you don't clean it. The first aid kit is in the bottom drawer of the hall vanity. Third compartment from the left." I didn't get up. I didn't rush to the bathroom to fetch the hydrogen peroxide, gauze, and medical tape like I had done 100 times before when he cut himself slicing citrus or opening mail. Kian stared at his hand, then looked back at me, his eyes dark with an unreadable, suffocating disorientation. "Aren't you going to bandage it?" he whispered. The anger had suddenly bled out of his voice, replaced by a strange, hollow confusion. "You're a doctor," I replied gently. "You have much steadier hands than I do." He stood there for what felt like an eternity, the man who had always been the undisputed master of this house, looking utterly adrift in his own living room. Finally, without a word, he turned on his heel and walked toward the bathroom, the door closing behind him with a heavy, final click. I looked down at my fingernails. The soft blush pink lacquer was dry. I blew on them once, stood up, and went to the linen closet to fetch a damp cloth to wipe his blood off the floor. I did it not out of love, nor out of spite. It was simply a mess that needed to be cleaned before it ruined the wood. The house was dead quiet by 2 a.m. Kian sat in his study, the bandage on his right hand stark and glaring beneath the soft glow of his brass desk lamp. He hadn't touched the patient files, stacked neatly in front of him. His laptop was open, the browser window displaying the private psychiatric forum he frequented, a secure board where clinicians, researchers, and occasionally anonymous patients posted case studies and queries. He hadn't meant to find it. He had been looking through recent threads on post-traumatic retrograde amnesia and hypnotic suggestion reversal, trying to understand why Sloane's post-hypnotic reintegration had gone so completely, horribly wrong. Then, his eyes had caught a newly pinned thread in the anonymous public section. Title: "My memory is back, but my feelings are gone. I can't even understand the
Person I used to be.
Just being in the same room as my husband and son makes me anxious. What do I do?" Kian's breath hitched. He clicked the link. Posted by user 77419. A week ago, the memories of my entire life came rushing back after 3 months of total amnesia. My husband, a respected psychiatrist, used clinical hypnosis and neurolinguistic memory repression to help me heal after our second child was stillborn at 8 months. While I was institutionalized, docile, and hollowed out like an empty shell, he took his young female patient to an isolated retreat to treat her trauma. When he brought me home and lifted the hypnotic block, he expected his old wife to return, the woman who cooked 2 separate breakfasts every morning, who kept his shirts pressed to perfection, who walked on eggshells around his fragile ego, and who tolerated a son who treated her like an unwelcome servant. The facts are all there. I remember falling in love with him in college. I remember the agony of labor. I remember the names of all the foods that make my son's throat close up. But the emotional bridge is ash. When I look at my husband, I feel the same thing I feel when I look at a stranger on the subway. Complete, utter detachment. When I look at my son, I feel an overwhelming exhaustion, tainted by a quiet sadness that I wasted so many years begging a child to love me when he was taught by his father that I was disposable. I don't hate them. Hate requires passion. I am just empty. I am making arrangements to leave. I just need to ensure the legal paperwork is finalized, so he cannot use his psychiatric credentials to declare me unfit or unstable. If anyone has recommendations for independent legal counsel specializing in medical coercion, please message me privately. Kian's hands trembled against the keyboard. The silver frame of his glasses seemed to dig into his temples, a sharp, throbbing headache blossoming behind his eyes. He reread the words 3 times. 4 times. Hate requires passion. I am just empty. No, Kian muttered aloud to the empty study, his voice cracking.
No.
That wasn't the protocol. The emotional imprint was supposed to re-anchor once the traumatic grief was excised. When Sloane had collapsed into psychotic depression following the stillbirth of their daughter, Maya, her grief had been feral, loud, and disruptive. She had screamed at him, accused him of being emotionally sterile, blamed his cold detachment for her isolation during the pregnancy. She had broken his porcelain figurines, disrupted his clinical schedule, and threatened to expose his questionable off-label prescribing habits to the hospital board. He had told himself that wiping her episodic memory of the final trimester and the child's death was an act of supreme mercy, a clinical intervention by a loving husband who happened to be an expert in cognitive restructuring. And taking Lila to the mountains? Lila was compliant. Lila looked at him with hero worship. Lila didn't scream or accuse. She sat at his feet and thanked him for saving her life. He had believed he could have both, an adoring disciple in Lila and a rehabilitated, docile domestic anchor in Sloane. He had planned to return, snap his fingers, lift the cognitive block, and slot Sloane right back into her designated place, grateful, quiet, and devoted. He had never imagined that when the brain was forced to sever the pain, it would cut the love along with it. A soft knock on the study door broke the silence. Kian slammed the laptop shut with a violent click. "Who is it?" The door creaked open. Oliver stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. His face was blotchy, his eyes red-rimmed.
Dad.
Oliver whispered, his voice trembling. "Mom isn't in her room. She's in the small room by the laundry. The door is locked from the inside." Kian pinched the bridge of his nose, swallowing the bitter bile rising in his throat. "Go back to bed, Oliver." "Dad." The boy's voice broke into a small, panicked whine. "Why won't she make my lunch for school tomorrow? I asked her before she went into that room, and she just handed me $20 and told me to buy hot lunch from the
Cafeteria.
She never lets me eat cafeteria food. She said it has cross-contamination with nuts." Kian looked at his son, the son he had indulged, the son he had taught to disdain. Sloane's anxious maternal fretting as smothering and neurotic. "She's just tired, Oliver," Kian said, but the lie sounded hollow, even to his own ears. "She's not tired," Oliver cried, tears spilling down his cheeks. "She looked at me like she didn't even care if I ate peanut butter and stopped breathing."
Dad, fix her.
"You're a doctor. Why didn't you fix her right?" Kian could only stare at his son, the cold realization settling into his bones. Like lead, there was no fixing what had been deliberately murdered. The next morning arrived with a gray, persistent drizzle that blurred the high windows of the suburban house. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. in the small housekeeper's bedroom behind the kitchen.
The
room was narrow, furnished only with a twin bed, a functional pine dresser, and a small window looking out onto the sodden rhododendron bushes in the backyard. For the first time in 10 years, I felt no morning panic. No sudden jolt of adrenaline reminding me to check the expiration dates on the oat milk, no frantic mental checklist of Kian's dry cleaning, no lingering knot of dread about whether the coffee beans were ground to the precise coarseness Kian demanded for his pour-over. I dressed in simple dark slacks and a charcoal knit sweater, pulled my hair back into a low knot, and walked into the kitchen with my canvas tote bag. Lila was already there, attempting to cook. The air smelled of burnt butter and scorched flour. She jumped when she saw me, nearly dropping a spatula. "Mrs. Hale, good morning." I was trying to make Dr. Hale's gluten-free buckwheat crepes, but the pan
kept sticking.
"I don't know why it's not working." She wore an oversized cashmere sweater, one of Kian's old ones, that slipped off her delicate shoulder, exposing a pale collarbone. It was an artful, vulnerable
"Tableau.
"You need to season the cast iron with grapeseed oil first," I said mildly, pouring myself a glass of tap water. "Butter burns at that temperature." Lila bit her lip, looking at me with a mixture of suspicion and timid confusion. Aren't you going to take over? Dr. Hale will be down in 10 minutes. He hates it when breakfast is late. You're being paid a monthly salary of $3,000 to manage the domestic duties of this house, Lila," I replied, setting the glass in the sink. "If you cannot make crepes, make toast. He will survive." Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Kian walked into the kitchen, dressed in his charcoal bespoke suit, his briefcase in hand. His eyes immediately darted past Lila and locked onto me. There were dark purple shadows under his eyes, his skin pale and taut. "Sloane," he said, stepping toward me. "We need to talk." "I have an appointment at 9, Kian," I said, checking the modest leather watch on my wrist. "What appointment?" His voice tightened with immediate suspicion. "You don't have any appointments. Your medical checkup isn't until next Tuesday at my clinic." "An independent appointment," I said cleanly. Oliver came trudging down the hallway, dragging his backpack along the floor.
He
Looked miserable. He cast a pleading look toward me, but when I didn't, immediately rushed to take his heavy bag or ask if he had his inhaler. His shoulders slumped further. Mom, Oliver muttered. My throat feels scratchy. In the past, that single sentence would have sent me into a flurry of activity. Checking his temperature with 3 different thermometers, brewing warm, lemon honey water before we knew about the honey allergy, calling the pediatrician, kissing his forehead a dozen times. Now, I simply looked down at him. Take a lozenge from the medicine cabinet. Oliver, if you develop a fever, tell the school nurse to call your father's office. Oliver flinched, as if I had struck him. Aren't you going to drive me to school? Lila has a valid driver's license, I said, glancing at the girl. It is part of her job description. Sloan, stop this right now, Kian commanded, his authoritative doctor's voice ringing against the kitchen tiles. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight, his fingers pressing into my pulse point. You are deliberately neglecting our child to make a petty point. You are punishing him for things he is too young to understand. I didn't pull away. I didn't struggle. I simply stood there, letting my wrist remain limp in his grip, and looked directly into his eyes behind his expensive titanium frames. Release my wrist, Kian, I said softly. He didn't move. You are having an emotional decompensation episode. I should never have cleared you for outpatient status so soon. Your effect is completely blunted. It's secondary shock. If you do not release my wrist in 3 seconds, I said, my voice dropping an octave into a chilling, absolute stillness, I will dial 911 on speakerphone, report a domestic assault, and have the responding officers document the bruise you are currently forming on my arm. Then I will submit that police report directly to the state medical board along with the audio recordings of your hypnotic suggestion sessions. Kian froze. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. His fingers loosened, slipping from my wrist as if my skin had suddenly turned red hot. You don't have recordings, he whispered, a tremor of genuine terror threading through his clinical veneer. You always were careless about your cloud storage backups, Kian, I said, adjusting my sweater sleeve over my wrist. You thought I was too stupid to understand the folder labeled Research Subject SH on our home server. I didn't wait for him to respond. I picked up my canvas bag, walked past Lila's stunned, pale face, and stepped out into the rain. The rain washed the windshield of the taxi as it pulled up to a stone-walled estate on the outskirts of the historic district. Frederick Moss was waiting for me under the wide portico of the main house. He wore a heavy wool sweater and dark denim, holding a massive black umbrella. As soon as the cab came to a halt, he stepped forward, opened the passenger door, and held the umbrella over my head before a single drop of rain could touch my coat. Sloan, he said, his deep voice carrying a warmth that felt like a roaring hearth after years spent in an icebox. Come inside. Isabel has been waiting by the window since 8. Thank you, Frederick, I said, stepping onto the dry stone of the porch. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, old leather-bound books, and freshly baked cinnamon bread. A small squeal echoed from the grand staircase, and 6-year-old Isabel came barreling down the polished steps in her woolen socks, throwing her tiny arms around my waist. Sloan. Uncle Fred helped me make cinnamon swirl. Look at my hands, they have flour on them. I knelt down, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, a genuine, unforced warmth flickered in the center of my chest. It wasn't the frantic, suffocating anxiety I used to feel with Oliver, that constant, desperate need to prove my worth as a mother. This was simple, clean, and unburdened. You did a wonderful job, Isabel, I said softly, gently tucking a stray curl behind her ear. Did you save a slice for me? The biggest one, she declared proudly, tugging my hand toward the bright, sunlit kitchen. Frederick watched us with a quiet, observant smile. He was 36, 2 years younger than Kian, but where Kian was all sharp angles, sterile arrogance, and cold clinical detachment, Frederick possessed the grounded, immovable strength of an ancient oak. He was a former federal prosecutor who now headed one of the most prestigious civil litigation and human rights firms in the state. After Isabel was happily settled at the kitchen table with her coloring book and a glass of milk, Frederick led me into his private study. The room was vast, lined with ceiling-high bookshelves and dominated by a heavy mahogany desk covered in neatly organized legal dossiers. I went through the digital files you forwarded last night, Sloan, Frederick said, his expression turning grave as he pulled out a leather armchair for me. He took a seat opposite, steepling his fingers. What Kian did to you goes far beyond medical malpractice. It borders on criminal assault and illegal chemical restraint. Can he stop the divorce? I asked, cutting straight to the core of my practical
Concern.
He mentioned declaring me incompetent. He has immense influence at St. Jude's psychiatric wing. Frederick let out a soft, humorless chuckle. He can try, but he would be walking straight into a legal buzzsaw. The recordings you pulled from his server clearly document him inducing hypnotic states without independent witness consent, specifically planting post-hypnotic amnesia triggers to suppress your knowledge of his medical negligence regarding your late daughter. Hearing Maya's name didn't bring the hysterical, blinding agony it once did.
The
grief was still there, but it was settled, like a smooth, heavy stone resting at the bottom of a river. Kian had thought that erasing the memory of her death would erase his guilt. Instead, he had merely given me the emotional clarity to see him for the monster he was. There's more, Frederick continued, sliding a thick manila folder across the
desk.
I had my forensic investigator pull the financial records for the clinic during the 3 months you were hospitalized. I opened the folder. The retreat to the Smoky Mountains wasn't paid for out of his personal funds. Frederick explained, his voice hard with professional disgust. He billed it as an experimental inpatient neurorecovery trial through the hospital's research endowment. He listed Lila Vance as the primary subject and you as the control baseline. He used hospital grants to fund a luxury cabin getaway with his mistress, while keeping you chemically sedated in a private ward under a falsified diagnosis of intractable puerperal psychosis. I looked at the receipts, the signed grant vouchers with Kian's immaculate signature, the itemized bills for 5-star dining and private mountain tours. He didn't just want to escape my grief, I said quietly, the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. He needed me locked away, so I couldn't dispute the grant allocation. I was the co-signatory on the family trust that co-funded that research chair. Precisely, Frederick said. If this hits the medical board, Kian Hale won't just lose his license. He will face federal fraud charges, grand larceny, and potential prison time. I closed the folder, resting my hands flat against the cool cardboard. I don't want his money, Frederick, I said. I only want what was mine before I married him, my grandmother's inheritance, the patent rights to the cognitive testing software I developed before he convinced me to become a housewife, and complete, unconditional freedom. Frederick leaned forward, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made the air feel suddenly charged. You will have all of it, Sloan, he said, his voice deep and steady. And what about your son? The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I looked toward the kitchen door, where the faint sound of Isabel's humming drifted down the hall. Oliver has spent 10 years learning from his father that love is a commodity to be withheld, that a mother is someone you order around and discard when someone prettier or more entertaining walks through the door. I said, feeling no anger, only a profound, hollow truth. I will provide for his physical needs through child support. I will not abandon him legally, but I cannot make myself bleed to keep a child warm when he has already learned to enjoy the sight of my cuts.
If
he wants a mother, he will have to learn what that word actually means. On his own. Frederick nodded slowly, a look of profound respect settling into his eyes. Then let us draft the papers. Over the next 2 weeks, the house on Elmwood Terrace descended into a strange, frantic madness. Without my silent, invisible labor keeping the machinery running, the foundation began to rot in plain sight. Lila, who had seemed so charming and capable when she was merely a pampered guest, proved entirely incompetent at running a 6,000-square-foot household. She shrank Kian's $300 Egyptian cotton shirts in the
dryer.
She forgot to purchase the specific digestive enzymes Kian required with his meals, leading to severe bouts of gastritis that left him irritable and doubling over in pain. Worst of all was the chaos with Oliver. Lila did not understand child management. When Oliver threw tantrums, she either cried and locked herself in the guest bathroom or gave him whatever he wanted to shut him up, which resulted in another terrifying trip to the urgent care clinic. When she bought him a box of artisanal cookies that contained almond meal, I watched it all from my small room behind the kitchen, entirely untouched by the storm. I spent my days at Frederick's office, preparing the legal filings or working remotely on a consulting contract with a cognitive assessment software firm that had leaped at the chance to hire me back. For the first time in a decade, my bank account was growing under my own name. One evening, I returned to the house around 7. The living room was in shambles. A broken vase lay in the corner, uncleaned.
A
Pot of burnt pasta had been abandoned on the stove, filling the house with the acrid stench of carbonized wheat. In the center of the living room, Kian was screaming at Lila. "How hard is it to read a label?" Kian roared, his face mottled red, his tie pulled loose. The boy could have gone into anaphylactic shock. Do you have any idea what an EpiPen injection does to a child's cardiovascular system? Lila was curled into an armchair, sobbing hysterically. I didn't know.
The
bakery said they were oat cookies. I was just trying to make him like me. You told me that if I came here, everything would be like the mountains.
You said
Sloane was just a roommate, that you didn't love her, that she was broken. Shut up. Kian bellowed, catching sight of me standing in the foyer. He froze. I calmly took off my trench coat and hung it on the brass coat rack. Sloane. Kian gasped, his voice cracking as he practically lunged across the
room toward me.
He looked haggard, his stubble unkempt, his silver glasses smudged with fingerprints. Sloane. Thank God you're home. Look at this.
Look at
what this incompetent idiot did to the house. I'm firing her. She's leaving.
Tonight.
I've already called a cab. Lila shrieked in betrayal.
Doktor Hale.
You promised me. Get your bags and get out. Kian snarled over his shoulder, not sparing her a
glance.
He turned back to me, his hands reaching out to grasp my shoulders. His palms were clammy, his breath ragged with desperation. Sloane, I'm sorry. I was wrong. The retreat, Lila, bringing her here, it was a clinical misjudgment, an error in transference management. I see that now. I fire her. It's just us now. You, me, and Oliver. We can reset. I'll cook dinner. Tonight. I bought your favorite sea bass from the market.
We can sit down as a
family. I looked at his hands on my shoulders. I felt neither disgust nor pity. Just the cold, clinical assessment of a specimen under a microscope. Take your hands off me, Kian, I said evenly. Sloane, please. His voice broke into a pathetic, pleading whine. The dignified, untouchable Dr. Hale was disintegrating before my eyes. Tell me what you want. Do you want me to beg? I'll beg.
Do you want me to step down from the
department? I'll do it. Just stop looking at me like I'm a ghost. Stop treating me like I don't exist. From the top of the stairs, a small voice broke through the shouting. Mom? Oliver stood on the landing. He was pale, his eyes swollen from crying, a faint rash still visible along his jawline from the almond flour. He was clutching a small notebook, the family recipe book I had handwritten years ago, filled with safe meal plans and allergy-free substitutes. Mom, Oliver cried, slowly walking down the stairs, one step at a time. Look, I found your book. I can learn to cook the safe meals myself. I won't ever ask Lila for candy again. I won't ever say she's nicer than you. I promise. I'll clean my room every day. I'll make my own bed. Just please come back to the big bedroom. Please don't leave us. He reached the bottom of the stairs and threw his arms around my hips, burying his face in my coat, sobbing with a violent, desperate grief that shook his entire small frame. Mom, please, don't look at me like you don't know me.
I'm Oliver.
I'm your baby. Kian looked at Oliver, then looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, triumphant hope. He truly believed that this weaponized display of our son's suffering would finally shatter my icy armor and drag me back into the burning house to be their martyr once more. I looked down at the boy clinging to my waist. I remembered the nights I had spent sitting by his bed while he had high fevers, singing until my throat was raw, only for him to push my hand away the next morning and tell me he wished Lila were his mother because Lila let him stay up late. I remembered him laughing when Kian mocked my anxiety at the dinner table. I gently, firmly reached down, took Oliver's small hands, and peeled them off my coat. I knelt down so I was at eye level with him. Oliver, I said, my voice quiet, steady, and devoid of the angry bite he was bracing for. You are 10 years old. You are old enough to understand cause and effect. Oliver sniffled, his chest heaving, his tears dripping onto the hardwood. When you spend years pushing someone away, telling them they are worthless, and taking pleasure in their humiliation, I told him, you do not get to demand that they stay just because you are suddenly uncomfortable without them. Mommy, he whimpered. I am your mother, and I will always ensure you have a roof over your head, food to eat, and medical care, I said. But the woman who begged for your affection, who let you treat her like dirt beneath your feet, died in that psychiatric hospital 3 months ago. Your father made sure of that. I stood up. Kian looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Sloan, you can't say that to a child. You're traumatizing him. No, Kian, I said, turning my eyes upon him. You traumatized him when you taught him that women are tools to be manipulated and discarded. I am simply letting him see the invoice for that lesson. I reached into my canvas bag, pulled out a thick legal envelope, and dropped it onto the glass coffee table. The thud was loud and definitive. You have been formally served, Kian. Divorce petition, asset division, and a full disclosure summons from the State Medical Disciplinary Board. Kian stared at the envelope. His breath stopped. What? What board summons? The one regarding the misuse of the Maya Hale Memorial Research Endowment. I replied softly. Frederick Moss filed the preliminary complaint with the Attorney General's office at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Kian staggered backward, his legs hitting the edge of the sofa, and collapsed onto the cushions, looking like a marionette whose strings had been cleanly severed. I turned, walked back out the front door, and into the waiting town car. Frederick had sent for me. The months that followed were a masterclass in bureaucratic and personal dismantling. Kian tried everything. First came the legal warfare. He hired the most expensive divorce litigators in the city, attempting to contest the petition on grounds of mental incapacity, claiming my memories were distorted by post-hypnotic confabulation. Frederick crushed them in the preliminary hearing. When the courtroom audio system played the digital recordings of Kian's hypnosis sessions, where his voice could be heard methodically commanding my subconscious to forget the crib, forget the heartbeat monitor, forget the signed release forms, and remember only your duty to maintain this household, the judge's face darkened into an expression of absolute disgust. The judge immediately issued a permanent restraining order, froze Kian's clinical assets, and granted me full temporary possession of my premarital inheritance and intellectual property. Next came the medical scandal. The investigative report published by the State Medical Board sent shockwaves through St. Jude's Hospital. The misuse of research grants to fund his private romantic getaway with Lila Vance was bad enough. The chemical restraint and non-consensual memory tampering of his own wife destroyed his reputation. Overnight, he was stripped of his department chair, suspended indefinitely from clinical practice, and faced a joint civil suit from the hospital trustees for grant embezzlement. Lila, realizing the sinking ship she had tied herself to, turned state's evidence against him in exchange for immunity from fraud charges, publicly releasing months of text messages where Kian had promised to dispose of his neurotic wife and elevate Lila to the position of clinic director. The mighty, untouchable Dr. Kian Hale became an outcast in his own professional community. One rainy afternoon in late autumn, I sat in the cafe across from the family court building, going over the final settlement documents with Frederick. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Kian walked in. He looked unrecognizable. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by an ill-fitting corduroy jacket. His hair was streaked with gray, his face hollow, the arrogant gleam behind his silver glasses replaced by a frantic, hunted exhaustion. Frederick immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively to shield my arm, but I placed a calm hand on Frederick's sleeve, shaking my head. It's all right, Frederick, I said. Kian walked over to our table, his hands trembling. He didn't look at Frederick. He kept his eyes pinned desperately on me. Sloan, he rasped, pulling a small, battered silver pendant from his pocket. It was the locket I had given him on our 5th anniversary, containing a microscopic engraving of our wedding vows. I found this in the study safe. Do you remember? You had it made in Florence. You said as long as I wore it, our minds would be connected. I looked at the silver pendant. I remember, I said. Then how can you do this? He begged, dropping to one knee beside the table, completely unconcerned that the entire cafe was watching him. Sloan, please. The board has revoked my license. The bank is foreclosing on the house. I have nothing left. I'm sleeping in a motel by the highway. Oliver is failing his classes. He cries for you every night. He won't eat unless I force him. That is the consequence of your choices, Kian, I said, sipping my tea. You tore down your own house. You cannot expect me to sleep in the rubble. I can fix it, he gasped, reaching for my hand, but Frederick's large, firm hand clamped onto Kian's wrist like an iron vice, stopping him inches away. Touch her again, Hale, and you violate your bail terms, Frederick said, his voice low, deadly, and carrying the weight of the law. Stand up. Kian looked at Frederick, then back at me, tears streaming down his hollow
cheeks.
Sloan, please, Kian wept, the sound pathetic and broken. Just hypnotize me. Bring someone in to wipe my memory. Make me forget how much I love you. Make me forget what I did to you. I can't live with this inside my head. It's burning me
Alive.
I looked down at the man who had played God with my mind, who had thought he could edit my soul like a rough draft of a research paper. No, Kian, I said, my voice soft, clear, and utterly devoid of malice. You are a psychiatrist. You should know better than anyone. The only way past the pain is to remember every single second of it. I signed the final page of the divorce decree, pushed the pen back to Frederick, and stood up. Goodbye, Dr. Hale. 6 months later, spring arrived in full bloom. I stood on the wide wooden deck of my new house, a sun-drenched, single-story craftsman nestled on a hillside overlooking the valley. The air was crisp, scented with pine needles and damp earth. Inside, the open-concept living room was filled with light, my drafting table covered in design sketches for a new cognitive rehabilitation application that my software company had just launched in partnership with several state universities. A small garden flourished in the yard below, filled with lavender, rosemary, and allergy-safe herbs. The gravel driveway crunched as a dark SUV pulled up. Isabel bounded out of the passenger side, her bright yellow sundress fluttering in the breeze, holding a wooden basket filled with freshly picked strawberries.
Sloan. Sloan. Look.
We went to the farm. I walked down the wooden steps, a genuine, radiant smile spreading across my face, and caught the little girl in a warm embrace, laughing as she pressed a sweet-smelling berry against my cheek. They look delicious, Isabel, I said. Are we making a tart today? Uncle Fred said only if you help, because his crust always comes out like cardboard, she giggled conspiratorially. Frederick stepped out of the vehicle, wearing a casual linen shirt, carrying a crate of fresh produce. He caught my eye, his warm, steady gaze holding mine, with an effortless understanding that required no manipulation, no clinical games, and no performance. She's not wrong, Frederick admitted with a self-deprecating grin as he walked up the path. My culinary skills are legally actionable. Then it's a good thing I'm in charge of the kitchen today, I replied, feeling a light, bubbling warmth settle comfortably in my chest. Later that afternoon, while Isabel was busy painting at the small easel Frederick had set up on the patio, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was a monthly update from the family court counselor handling Oliver's mandatory therapy sessions. I opened the report. Oliver was living with Kian's sister, who had taken over his legal guardianship. After Kian's final psychiatric breakdown landed him in a long-term residential care facility. According to the therapist, Oliver was slowly making progress. He was learning to manage his own allergies. He was attending behavioral therapy to unlearn the manipulative patterns his father had drilled into him. Attached to the email was a scanned, handwritten letter in a child's clumsy handwriting. Dear Mom, Aunt Sarah helped me make nut-free banana bread today. It didn't burn. I remembered to wash the counter first, so there was no cross-contamination. The therapist said I shouldn't write this to make you come back, but just to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry I treated you like Lila was better. You were the one who kept me safe, and I was mean to you. I don't expect you to live with us again. Aunt Sarah says trust is like a glass vase that takes a long time to glue together. If you ever want to visit, I will save you a piece of banana bread. But if you don't, I understand. Oliver. I read the letter twice. The hollow ache that used to live in my chest didn't flare up with guilt.
It didn't drown me in panic.
Instead, there was a quiet, clean space, a space where something healthy might one day grow, very slowly from the bare soil, provided it was tended with honesty and respect. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer of my desk. I didn't rush to the phone. I didn't book a flight. But for the first time, I didn't close the door entirely. I simply left it unlocked, on my own terms, in my own time. Sloan. Frederick's voice called softly from the patio door. I turned around. He was standing there with 2 glasses of iced tea, the late afternoon sun casting long, golden rays across the clean wood floors of my home. The oven is preheated, he said gently, a quiet question in his eyes. Are you ready? I looked at the sunlit deck, at Isabel laughing as she chased a butterfly across the grass, and at the man standing before me who had never once asked me to be smaller or quieter than I was. "Yes," I said, stepping into the golden light. "I'm ready."